It's well located, about 10 minutes from Pearson International Airport, the main airport for Toronto area. It's really going to be of greatest interest to probably to somebody that's either in the transport business that wants to move into part or all of the property in the future, or somebody that wants to, a developer, which is probably then going to be a local developer that wants to purchase and redevelop the property because the real value is in the land and location rather than the building. Or thirdly, potentially to basically a passive investor that has a whole lot of money they want to invest in a safe country and a reasonably safe currency, if any currency is safe, and they're willing to park it and take a lower return. If somebody's just looking at cap rate, I mean, based on it's the ultimate cap rate is going to depend on what the negotiated price is, obviously. Current market rent on this is about 90,000 a month Canadian, $1,080,000 a year. Market rent would be $1.5 million a year right now, but even at a lower purchase price and at market rent, it's going to be a low return if somebody's just looking at cap rate. I do expect that a buyer will be looking to present value the discount on the rents from what market is and negotiate on the rate. But glad to talk to anybody afterwards if they think they have somebody that might be suitable for and get into greater detail.
How much density could you put on here? 7 acres.
Yeah, Sandy, I guess it depends what you're going to build. We've got about 7 acres. I have to check because of the proximity to the airport if there's a height limit. Mm-hmm. It's zoned industrial, but there's an office building, an office building just on the north side of Derry Road. This is Tompkin and Derry. You know the area a bit, Sandy?
Yes.
This is there's a McDonald's on the corner of Tompkin and Derry. This is the first property south of the McDonald's. There's an office building immediately across the street on the north side of Derry. So you're right at a highway interchange, or very close to a highway interchange. You've got a stoplight to go through and the McDonald's to pass. But it's not going to, as I say, sell straight on cap rate, but it's a very interesting property for somebody that wants to, that knows the area. This kind of zoning is hard to get.
Okay.
Thank you.
Be glad to circle back with you later, Sandy, if I should give you a call.
Yeah, please do.
Will do.
Any other questions for Ray, or are there any other investment properties that anyone would like to share?
We are going to have a retail plaza, institutionally owned, managed by us for over 20 years. It's coming to market soon. It'd be in the $80–90 million range. It's just been redeveloped. We're building pads on the site now. There's a medical office building leased to the government on it. A new Save on Foods. I'll provide it to everybody as soon as we put the information together. Near the university. I think it's about 17-acre site. And it's a first-class investment. And we will send that out as soon as we get the information put together.
So, der hat das Blatt noch nicht fertig. Okay.
Canadian.
What's the yield on something like that, Sandy?
Probably about 5%.
And the average length, the vault, the average length of the leases?
I think about 11 years.
Okay. So stabilized, yeah?
Yeah, it's stabilized. Yeah. And it's about a 5.5% unlevered return. Debt today would be, what would debt be, Dan, on that? 4.5. Probably 4%. So that you get positive leverage. Probably get a yield of 7 or 8% on near the university, of a trophy type asset, a brochure quality asset. Management's available like on a continue to continue as well.
Okay, thank you.
So Ray,
Everyone?
can I come back to what you said about Mississauga?
Sure.
It's a long stop, but I have two millionaire Irishmen, one of which I've dealt with called William Redmond, one of them, and I'm trying to name the other fellow. I saw them again in February when they came over and bought me out a very expensive lunch in Paris. They are millionaires and they have a hard-on for truck stops. There are no truck stops in France, or very few, and they've bought some in England. They just want to spend in cash or develop truck stops. And their target was France, because with Willie Redmond, we've owned together and I've managed 5 or 6 properties, all long since sold. But if I could have details for your property there, I'd be happy to send it to these guys in Dublin. Willie Redmond has invested in 2 or 3 shops in New York, so crossing the pond doesn't seem to be a problem for him. Never done anything in Canada, but the possibility of something that is a repair facility that becomes a truck stop or something like that near the airport. Obviously, you're not France, but maybe they could look at it. They seem to be bizarrely cash buyers for these sort of assets. In their mind, they view there's a glorious future.
I'll send you the basic, just 4-page information sheet. The professional photographer is going to be there at 6:30 tomorrow morning.
Okay, so there's no hurry. When you've got it already, I mean, it's less than 10% chance, but let's put it through to Willie Redmond, he's called, and his who's the minority partner. They had they assembled a portfolio of second-rate activity in industrial properties all over Ireland over the last decade, and they sold them 2 years ago, just as COVID came in. They made 180 million profit on it, and I believe that's money sitting at the back of a sock drawer at the moment. So nice to spend it somewhere.
Thanks, Bill. Look forward to connecting with you.
Yeah.
Okay, that's great. I think we're going to be keeping with Bill, actually. Bill was kind enough to share his market, the view on France with us. Bill, would you carry on then?
Okay. Right. So you've received the handout. Now I've got it here, and I'll if I can, I'll take control of the site. So I'm going to do the essential elements of the French commercial property in 7 minutes, and I try and hold on to that timing. So let me see if that works. Partager. Right. Are you seeing? Can you see?
Yes.
My presentation. Okay.
Yes.
So here we are. Nice picture of the Arc de Triomphe. I'm going to be there tomorrow evening, flying the ensign, the white ensign of the Royal Navy, because we're having a large ceremony to commemorate the Platinum Jubilee of Queen Elizabeth. And so we're there, and then we've been invited to the Élysée Palace afterwards. So if I want to slip in a quick word with my best friend Emmanuel about CORFAC, I'll see if he's interested. Now, I prepared this actually about 3 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago. So since then, the main subject was we've had a presidential election. There were 12 candidates, approximately 3 normal people and 9 nutters. So luckily, the normal person got in, who's the chap there, Emmanuel Macron, on the middle line. It would have been enormously draconian because he got in with 52%, and at 42% was Madame Le Pen, the blonde lady to his left, who is a right-wing Trotskyist nutter, who would have ruined France. The idea was just give everything to the poor, let's get rid of all the foreigners, except the English, very selective, but any other foreigner has to go, but the English can stay, or the British can stay. Very nice of her. So luckily she got in. The main issue was that these two have destroyed the bipartisan party system we've had since de Gaulle. So we used to have a socialist party, and we used to have a party on the slightly to the right called the Les Républicains. That's the lady on the bottom left, pretty lady in blonde. They each one of them got 1% and the other one got 4.8%. So imagine that. This is the new wave that may come your way as traditional, the new form of elections and minority pressure groups, the internet and everything else might actually wipe out certain people. Now, we'd all rather hope that they wipe out the Conservative Party in England, who are the nutters there, Mr. Johnson. But so they got in. For what it's worth, we now have the parliamentary elections in 10 days' time, and we hope that Macron gets a majority there. Maybe he won't, because the man on his right, if you can see where Macron is a chap called Jean-Luc Mélenchon, who's a nutter on the left. He's absolutely a Marxist. He's likely to get a fairly high amount of the votes, and therefore might be voted the prime minister. That would mean we have a different president to the prime minister, which will be bollocks for the future 5 years as you try and get through some reforms, because we approximately have 1960 rules on employment, 1960 rules on unions and their power, etc. So a lot of things that are wrong in France. So that's the first point. Now we're going to come on to just, I'm going in no particular order. Logistics, like the rest of the world, has never been so hot. Suddenly we find ourselves with too few logistic buildings in France for normal logistics based on large buildings close to a motorway exit anywhere in France, ideally on the north-south line. We have none of the 10 ports of France, none of the ports of France figure in the top 10 ports of Europe. And the top 10 includes the port of Valletta in Malta, not the biggest port in the world, and also Barcelona, not the biggest. So the French ones, thanks to the unions and their have stopped. So what happens in France is everything comes in just about to Rotterdam and Antwerp, and then drops down on a truck and goes south into France. So that's how we get our stuff mostly. So we don't have enough space. We then have this massive phenomenon of last kilometer logistics. So these are the rents, which are among the lowest rents in Europe. These are euros per square meter. If you see, Paris is now at 61. That's the red figure. The equivalent in London would be somewhere at 140 to 160. So it looks a bit cheap. We have reasons why we're cheaper, because we have enormous employment, salary, service social charges. But we now haven't seen it for a long time. We're now seeing rental growth. That was only 58 a year ago. It's now 61, heading for 65. So we're fairly excited. There's money to be made in logistics. Next, just a word, one of the markets that has suffered, like all around the world, is hospitality. We have had our market in the doldrums, although we've had the most amazing recovery package from the government with the whatever it costs type policy. So it hasn't worked so well in hotels because they were paid an awful lot of money to furlough all their staff. The staff went off and watched Netflix for 18 months. And then when they came out of furlough, they decided they found another job, which wasn't in restaurants or hotels. It was in something different. So we are missing 300,000 people in the restaurant business, and probably half of that in the hotel business. So here's a little map of Paris, for what it's worth, which shows our hotels. They all are, and we have a shortage. We didn't have a shortage for the last 2 years. We have a shortage of hotel rooms. We have all that lot come to a total of 75,000 rooms. Dubai has 110,000, and Dubai only has a population of 4 million. We have 12 million in the Paris region, so we have a crucial shortage of Paris. If ever you come to visit, there are 6 or 7 big salons a year when there are no hotel rooms to let. So there's a big push to develop hotels, and get back to what is typically an 85% occupancy rate, which is huge for any market. But that's the reason. Retail, for what it's worth, here's a colorful map that shows all the retail shops of Paris. So this is the sector that also has suffered. France has the second highest ratio of retail space per capita in Europe, beaten only by Sweden for some reason. So we have lots of shops, mostly built since the 1950s. And what they are generally is shoeboxes. We have all these ghastly out-of-town retail units. We have a very few out-of-town retail parks as you have in America, which are wonderful with the middle car park and the rest. What we have is one, you drive and you get your shoes, you get back in the car, you drive to the next one and you get your food, drive to the next one and you get your city. Those are all closing. But the good news is we have a massive environmental backlash. So you can no longer convert anything that's agricultural land into anything but agriculture for 1,000 years. And so we're massively in brownfield sites. So bits of the retail world have done very well, because second old nasty looking shoebox at the entry of a city, and this is what happens all over France, is no longer in use. No one really wants it, but actually it's a prime redevelopment site for residential or another type of retail or something else. So that's coming out of judgment. We've actually had, we have some problems, and we have quite a vacancy in many of the main streets of Paris. But some of them are putting out nicely. The luxury market has fared extremely well through the COVID, and certainly now. The Champs-Élysées, which is more mass market, but our main avenue, which is the Blue Avenue, running north-east, sort of northwest, east, southeast, just north of the River Seine there in the middle, that's fared quite well. But we do have streets with up to 30% vacancy rate, if you know some of them, Rue de Rennes, Faubourg Saint-Honoré, a few other roads, which have suffered, like in the rest of the world. Quick word for offices. Generally speaking, we've had a lot of problem in offices in the Paris region, where we've had a drop in demand, but we've had the markets held reasonably strong in the provinces. So here we are, the markets. The plan on the left is France, shows the top markets for letting, Lyon, then Marseille, then Nantes, and all that. So there's been an active market. And on the right is the Paris region with the map. So in France, we have the largest office market in the world. We're bigger than Tokyo, and we're bigger than Greater New York, 55 million. What turns us over in Paris is that we have a 5% of our market turns over every year, which is very, very high. It's because of our short leases. That is to say, we typically have 2.6 million square meters lease every year, with a fee of 15%. So if you're on that market, that's a huge letting market, huge income of it. The normal 2.6 million average dropped to about 1.9. So they've suffered, and we have on this map, if you're inside Paris, you're laughing. If you're in what they call the Première Couronne, the inner suburbs, that's the light blue circle on the right-hand map, you're gonna have a problem if you're east, and you're probably okay if you're west. And if you're on the map, the outer sector, which is the light brown sector, and you're vacant, I'm afraid you're in trouble. There are no tenants. So you'll have a 3 to 4 year vacancy, which can't do your values very much good. But nevertheless, quite a lot of transactions. Here's a pretty row of 20 major transactions last year. So all great buildings, mainly new. This is the new phase in France of environmentally friendly new buildings with lots of labels. If you, at the moment, you can buy and sell these buildings, you can let them and all the rest, but within a couple of years, you will not be able to let a building that doesn't have environmental labels. You will not be able to finance a building that does not have labels, which include the American one called BREEAM, many French ones, and we're inventing new ones. And certainly as from now, you cannot sell them to a French institution and probably a German one, any of the sovereign funds from Korea, Norway and the rest, they don't want to touch them at all. So what we are seeing is a lot of cranes in Paris as people renovate them. The good news within the walls of Paris is you do get a hike in rents. We've now reached the top rent. We have 5 transactions in Paris at over 1,000 euros per square meter, which is a never before. It's taken 20 years to reach on a stabilized inflation basis the rent we had in the boom period of 30 years of 1989. So 30 years to get back to 1980 to stabled 89 level rents, which is 1,000 per square meter or past that. Here's a regional office. Here's a little plan that our friends at Deloitte, they probably do that in America, but in Europe, they do a crane survey in most of the European countries, which is very good. So it's very accurate. They tell you on these are little dots and there's a plan to show what it is. They show you what's under construction in levels of what has planning permission, then what has planning permission has a crane on it and deliveries. And so we have not, unfortunately, been able to stop the massive development build, although what is super difficult, you cannot finance a speculative office development in France. And I imagine that's pretty well the same for anywhere else. So you're either doing a corporate finance or a few people have special dispensation, but you can't turn up and buy one of these buildings unless you're going to pay in equity on that. So that's offices. I think last slide now, just to remind you, this is the CAC 40. These are the 40 main French companies that make up the CAC 40 stock exchange listing, which is fairly recent, only came into place in 1982. The FTSE 100 is a lot older, and your American one as well, I believe. So these are the large firms. I wouldn't pretend to know them all well, but I have in my 30 years here, probably dealt with at least half of them. I'd say I have good contacts with about 5 or 6. So these are major firms, mostly very profitable. If anything that's in luxury, they're having a field time. Anything that's in even exporting, we build motorways around the world, bridges. We sell you all the chips you've got on your credit card, Gemalto. We sell you all the alcohol, Pernod Ricard, Total and the rest. Unibail-Rodamco is licking its wounds. It unfortunately became Unibail-Rodamco Westfield when it bought the Australian developer called Westfield, which included a massive portfolio in North America, and that has totally tanked. They've dropped 60% their share value. There's 60% discount from net asset value. So if you want to make an investment, this is the company to put your money in. You'll buy someone that's now pulling out of America, selling off their shopping centers, and they will recapture the discount from NAV of 60%. So sometime in the next year or two, your shares will grow by 60% if you invest in Unibail-Rodamco, we think. So if you have any, if you want to deal with any of these people, generally speaking, I can approach them on your behalf if necessary, talk to them, but in at least half the cases, I've got good contacts, certainly in the luxury people, L'Oréal and Kering and LVMH. I'll get the name, and what they do, the French way, is they delegate locally. So you will find there's a man for LVMH based in Chicago, for instance, that deals with the major things they want to do in America. So love to talk to you, but I'll just point you back to Chicago, and you talk to this Frenchman, and he'll talk. He's got an enormous amount of independence. Delighted to talk to anyone else, and don't think because it's luxury and billionaires and the owner, who is the 3rd richest man in the world, they don't want to talk to you. They want to talk to anyone that can deal with them. So don't be shy. These are amazing companies all over the world, and it's quite easy to approach them. And they have delegated powers in most cases. A few that have to go back to some difficult person in the property department of the headquarters in Paris. But if not, do consider using these people. Okay, so that's me in a bit over 7 minutes.
Bill, that's great. Thank you very much. Are there questions for Bill?
Yeah, could you send that list? Because we'll look through the people that we think are doing business in Manitoba and communicate with you if we can make a contact. Some of them have surplus properties, etc., like Lafarge.
I was busy trying to write out the list. Sandy had the smart approach.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. Lafarge don't have joint up routing. I've done some work for them. They don't really have a property department, or they in-source. They bring in one man and they only last about 2 years and then get sacked. So the headquarters Lafarge is actually joined with a huge German company called Holcim, So it's Holcim Lafarge. So I don't know if that changes things. It's German. It's the bigger bit. I think is the German, is the French Lafarge. Unless I'm wrong, I don't know if Max can say different. How big was Holcim German Swiss? I suppose many of the decisions are made in France, not Germany.
I'm sure you're right. It's usually like that, so.
But if someone is interested in Lafarge, Holcim, which is actually a Swiss company.
Oh yes, I was going to say.
I know a number of people there actually, so I'll be happy to make some introductions, including some of the people on the board, but that would be too high. But I could find others in the company.
Yeah, I suppose what we could do is prepare one of these sort of little graphics with all the logos, and in all honesty, put a note on 1 to 5 saying I know vaguely, but I've no one there at 1, and at 5, I'm taking out on a regular basis to dinner or lunch the main man in property, which I won't have many 5s if at all, but and then we would know that might be an interesting to do. You get out your top 20, 30 Swiss companies.
Yep.
You guys in Canada do your main Canadian companies, Germany and America, and that might be easier. I know the tendency is to have this enormous long list, and then everyone exaggerates in these conversations to pretend I really know this person or something. But the CORFAC way, the introduction is worth 20%. If 20% for introducing, and then if you then did something with the deal, a little bit more than 20%, if you actually had a hand in it. But generally speaking, sort of people we hand over to you guys in the foreign country, and you do everything. It's your partnership.
What's the development pipeline like in Paris at the moment? Is it tough because of the rising increasing costs of construction and finance, or is it going strong?
Oh, say again the question, Johnny.
And can you not hear me very well? What's the cost? What's the development pipeline like in Paris at the moment?
Well, so it was what I showed you there in the Deloitte Crane survey. It's 2.5 million square meters over 3 years, about 720,000 square meters, put a 0 on that for square feet per year. If it's in the inner Paris and suburbs and the Paris, it'll steal a tenant from an old building that's not performing with the new regulations, new rules. If it's new and it's in the outer suburbs, then they're fucked. they're going to have a big bank problem.
Yeah. Sorry, wrong question. We're seeing in London all the B grade space. The landlords can't get finance to do things up. And then obviously they're just going to stay vacant for a long time, which is the same principle what you're saying. But some of the landlords who managed to do really well, they're absolutely killing it on developments and making massive, the highest rents we've seen in a long time. So the London market.
Yeah, a little bit like that with Paris. Some of the brand new buildings are over 1,000. But your advantage in England is you've gone massively into the build to rent residential market. So your crap office block in Croydon will have a highest and best use in residential, even with whatever your country has in terms of social housing requirements, even if you have to give over 10%, 20% or contribute to something in the we have much more restrictive rules in France. We legislate against Airbnb, we legislate against conversion of existing buildings to residential in most places. So, and yet we have one of the greatest housing crises the greatest we've ever known, and we're pretty high up in the list. We have a chronic shortage of housing, residential housing, in the Paris region and the Lyon region and the rest. So overall, though, we probably have enough housing for everyone who's in France, but it's in the wrong places. It's in the former industrial zones. So if we'd voted for the man on the bottom right, called Mr. Zemmour, who I think is ex-Nazi party, he would have got rid of all the foreigners. They'd all be sent back to North Africa, and then he would start moving people who've economically moved to the Paris region. So get back to regions like Lorraine, which is our former industrial areas, but the north of England, of the equivalent of that, get back there because there's empty social housing, which is true. But anyway, in the Paris region, we have interesting. What I would mention though is I've actually been dealing with a Canadian company called Real Star. So Ray and go. There's a company called Real Star run by a chap called Mr. Prince, and he has a very debonair son called Ryan Prince, who's based in London, and he is absolutely at the top of the peak, if you guys want to follow on this, of the build to rent market. And what he's done is he has already built 6 tower blocks of high level residential. Charlie, for instance, if you see them, there's one at Elephant and Castle, there's 2 at Wembley, 1 at Stockwell. He has 25,000 residential units across Canada because he's backed by the pension fund of the state of the province of British Columbia, who are called Correal, I think they call it, Quadreal. And I've been trying to get him to come to France to build towers or convert a tower into residential. He's currently looking. He's looking at other markets. He'd like to go into Germany. He'd like to go into. He specifically mentioned Holland, and he specifically mentioned Denmark. But this is the coolest Canadian you have ever met. He's a surfer. He's a dude. He's about 40 years old. He's good-looking bloke, and he's a very decent chap. And he's running this empire in London. He's just sold for 1.1 billion euros the majority of the apartments to Quadreal, who's not very complimentary of because they're very slow civil servant fund from Vancouver. But this company Quadreal has 2 billion euros that they want to invest through Real Star and their subsidiary in London called Uncle, and that's probably the thing you might have heard of, Charlie. They want to spend that money partially in Canada, but in other countries. So if you've got any of the most incredible build to rent, these people come in, they don't build to rent and sell, they build to rent to hold. They will build you a tower block in Zurich, if ever you could, I don't think you can do, but they'll do something rather amazing. And then they'll remain the owners. They will furnish it in designer furniture. They have a formula which is studios. They have a formula which is 1 bed. They have a formula that's 2 bed. Generally speaking, they're not families, so they don't upset the local mayor by bringing 10,000 kids in who all need a kindergarten. They are fully funded. They've got the money from Canada, and they're absolutely amazing. This is the wave. I mean, they've got 2,500 apartments in London at the moment. And they are, so there's one for you to consider. Sandy, do you know Quadreal and they're out of Toronto. Ray, do you know them at all? Real Star?
Ray, you're on mute.
Oh, Ray, you're on mute.
Sorry. I deal with Quadreal quite a bit on their industrial side. I had never spoken to them about residential. Quadreal is basically the real estate brokerage arm owned by the British Columbia Pension Fund, which is the ultimate asset holder. But yeah, that's interesting. I was not familiar with that Real Star entity in the residential side.
So the way for residential, don't contract Quadreal, who are slow and civil servants, but go into Real Star. Go and meet the main man. He's about 82, based in Toronto, and in London. You know, his wonderful son, Ryan Prince, he's called. I've met a couple of times. Looking to do. Ryan obviously is doing Europe, based over here since he came to London in 2001. Charlie, do you know Uncle at all?
I've heard of it, and I've also heard of the Prince guy. It's a family one, isn't it? So he's the son, I think, from memory.
Yeah. So
Charlie,
Ryan
the guys
Prince,
the guys in London are Seaforth Land. Tyler Goodwin is doing the commercial side, which is the quadrille commercial entity in London, developing Space House in Kingsway and Bleeding Heart Yard and one or two other bits and pieces.
Okay. Well, I think you can consider two clients. There's Quadrille, who apparently all have a property in Paris. I have no idea which one. So they've done them separately. And then there's Realstar for the residential side. Maybe they also Quadrille do direct residential, but consider it as two clients if you want to. And Realstar has this source of unbelievable equity from plus a couple of ideas, because Ryan Prince hinted that they weren't the fastest operators in the world. So they couldn't respond to a public tender that was on two towers I work on in the east of Paris. But they came up and said, look, we also very, very close to Morgan Stanley. So we have other sources of equity. So a very ambitious, the world is the oyster.
Bill, are you seeing
mentioning.
many people coming from the UK as a result of Brexit to set up home from the commercial side? Is there any take up?
Well, as occupiers, yeah, I mean, you follow the rate. We had the 2 or 3 public tenders where we won. I think we got the European Pharmaceutical Auditor. We got another. We generally, in the order of imperative, just to remind you, the big winner is Dublin, has got the most number of Brexit jobs following the exit, but it's coming to an end. The next one was Amsterdam, who got an awful lot. Frankfurt got quite a few. And France looked awful for about a year and a half, and then actually began to pick up. So we did have, on the one hand, we've got Morgan Stanley brought 300 people over, JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs brought a team of 600. There's a few little wins, which are nothing compared to what Dublin has received. And on the other hand, we have a pulling out. We have HSBC, the big bank my father worked for, is pulling out of France. They bought a portfolio from Credit, the CFC it's called. They paid 29 billion euros 20 years ago. And they've decided retail banking doesn't work in France, which is true if you're not French. So they have sent it, they put it to, as it Fortis, I think, have been paid, I think 29 billion. They're not buying it for 29 billion. HSBC is saying, please take everything off our hands, all the property, all our staff, and here's 29 billion to contribute for your pension fund hole and all that. So we have a few exits from that world. I think there's a range of people coming over with many offices have opened up for 10, 20, 30 people. So, but it's nothing significant compared to, I do regular trips to Dublin, and it's just staggering to see what has occurred and what continues in the Irish market, because it's the preferred zone of a friendly environment. They speak English, they're workaholics, a multi-task team in an environment that is home, and the negative bit of having bloody expensive housing, shortage of the best qualified staff, and the fact that you're on the arse end of Europe, because it's a bloody long way from Dublin to anywhere in Europe. It doesn't matter. They just see the other qualities of friendly, good fun to be, high quality people, and very very tax friendly.
Thank you very much, Bill. Are there any other comments to share or questions for Bill? That was a great review of the market. Thank you very much. I think if that's the case, once again, thank you, Bill. I would just like to share a few upcoming dates, and then Jonathan, perhaps you have some further news to share. With respect to the upcoming dates, we have actually in the Netherlands on the 14th to 16th of June, in 2 weeks, CORFAC will be sponsoring a booth there being managed by Friss. It's called Provada. We will have a short video about CORFAC being shown on the screens of the booth there. And we'll also have a listing of all the CORFAC countries. So your names will be there too. Your countries will be there, I should say. And there'll also be a brochure, which I believe there you'll find your names as well. That's happening in a couple of weeks. It's focused on the Dutch market. And then, of course, in July, mid-July, 12th and 13th, we meet in Dublin. I believe everyone has the plan, the program, but of course, we'll send out some additional information and looking forward to that. I think we have a few people coming from the States as well. And so far, we should have a pretty good turnout. I hope everyone does come. That's a midweek thing from Tuesday to Wednesday in Dublin. And then in September, the 14th to the 17th of September is the CORFAC Fall Summit in Seattle. And lastly, October 4th to 6th is Expo Real. And of course, CORFAC will have representation there, and we are being very kindly looked after by Max and Claudia with respect to having a booth there and participating in Expo Real. Jonathan, anything further to add?
No, just I think you guys may know, for those interested, after the Dublin meeting of CORFAC, SIOR is having their European conference that same time. And I know Charlie will be attending. CORFAC is also a sponsor of that program. We will have room for material to set out, which we plan to do. I'm working with Charlie on ordering some CORFAC giveaways, which we'll also have, so a little branding. But you know, I attended ICSC last week in Las Vegas, which, for those of you who don't know, it's probably the biggest retail-oriented show in the US. Although that being said, when I started going there 25 years ago, it was exclusively retail. Now there's a lot more full service companies attending. The numbers were back up, I'm guessing somewhere in the 25,000 range. We had several of our CORFAC firms in the booth meeting clients. So the mood was very good. And I actually had appointments with several companies in markets where CORFAC does not currently have representation. So I don't know, Jennifer and Diane, you guys have anything to add, but I think Daniel gave you the big picture. We will be having a regional conference in St. Louis in about 3 weeks. We're excited about that. We're looking at about 30 to 40 people for that. It's 24 hours, kind of an in and out thing, best practice sharing, etc. So no, all in all, things are good. It's good to see many of you here.
And perhaps I might just add as a reminder, I know, Jonathan, you've let everyone know, but of course there is a new or recently added CORFAC affiliate in India. I believe is the last new member to join.
And we're hoping to have a new affiliate in Poland soon.
Ah.
Keep our fingers crossed.
Great.
All right. Well, unless there's anything else, I thank everyone. We've managed to be 10 minutes early, so that's good. Everyone has a little bit of a credit here. And I thank you very much for participating. Looking forward to seeing everyone in Dublin in a month's time. We will not have a July call. Obviously, we're actually going to meet in Dublin. So our next call will be towards the end of September, but hoping to see everyone in Dublin. Thank you for joining.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Good to see you.
Good to see you. Bye-bye.
Hi, Marini.
Thanks, Bill.